I need to tell you what I saw happen to my people. Because if I don't, who will remember the truth? My name is Obioma, and I was 12 years old when the war ended. Old enough to understand what we'd lost, young enough to still believe we might survive it. I remember the morning the Nigerian soldiers came to Nkwo. We'd been sitting in the village square all night, waiting. My grandfather Nwokolo sat in front with the other elders, his back straight, even though I knew his bones ached. Behind him, my mother held my baby sister, whose belly was swollen from hunger, not food. I sat next to Chinonso, the teacher who'd been writing everything down in notebooks he'd buried under the big ukwa tree. He'd made me help him dig the hole at night, made me swear I'd never tell where they were hidden. When the trucks came, the red dust rose up like blood in water. The soldiers were young. Some of them looked barely older than my brother who'd gone to fight and never came back. Their commander was Hausa. I could tell by the marks on his face, different from ours. He spoke our language, but it sounded wrong in his mouth, like he was chewing rocks. "Where are the Biafran soldiers?" he demanded. "Where are the weapons?" My grandfather stood up so slowly I heard his knees crack. "There are no soldiers here, no weapons. Only people who chose to die on their father's land rather than die running." I held my breath. The commander walked through our people, his soldiers pointing guns at us like we were dangerous. When he got to Chinonso, he stopped. "You, why are you not fighting?" Chinonso looked him straight in the eye. "I am fighting, just not with guns." The commander's hand went to his pistol. Every person in that square stopped breathing. Then my baby sister started crying, this thin, hungry wail that seemed too big for her tiny body. And something changed in the commander's face. He lowered his hand. "This war is over. The Republic of Biafra is finished. You are Nigerians again." But we weren't, not really. We were Igbo people who'd lost the war and everything else besides. I watched what came after. I watched my uncle return from Lagos with nothing, his houses taken, his business gone, holding just a paper that said 20 pounds would make up for everything he'd built. I watched grown men weep when they learned their life savings had vanished, that our money was worthless, that the country we tried to leave had taken everything we owned and called it abandoned property. "They want reconciliation," my uncle said, "but they take everything we had." I thought we were finished. I was 12 years old and I thought my people were done. But then I saw something I'll never forget. I saw my cousin Adana come back from the war. She'd fought as a soldier, dressed as a man, shot a gun, watched people die. The government said there were no women soldiers, so officially she didn't exist. But she was real, standing in our compound, thin as a stick, eyes like stones. When the men said women should go back to traditional roles, should marry and forget, she laughed, actually laughed. "I fought for the right to choose who I would be," she said. Then she gathered the women, the ones who'd lost everything, and started a trading cooperative. The men mocked them, women playing at business. But Adana had learned logistics in the war, learned how to move goods when everything was trying to stop you. Within 3 years, their cooperative was the biggest in the district. Within 5, she was traveling to Lagos, building networks, making money nobody could take away because it lived in her mind and her hands. I watched Obi, who'd been trained to kill, go back to his father's rusted forge and start making hoes and machetes again. People came from other villages to buy. Then more people came. Within 2 years, he had apprentices. He was building instead of destroying, and he taught himself to remember how. I saw Chinonso dig up those notebooks and start teaching under the ukwa tree. Not just mathematics and English, but stories. Stories of who we were, what we survived, why we mattered. Every Friday, he gathered us children and told us about the war, about the courage, about the people who died and the ones who lived. My mother said we should forget, that remembering only brought pain. But Chinonso knelt down and told us, if we forget who we were, we cannot know who we can become. Memory is not just about the past, it is about the future. I was one of those children under the tree. I learned to read from Chinonso's salvaged books. I learned our history from his buried notebooks. I learned that my people had survived worse than this, that we knew how to fall and rise again. But I also saw the ones who couldn't rebuild in Igbo land. The land was exhausted, the opportunities gone, so they left. Not running this time, but searching. They went to Lagos with nothing, slept 6 to a room, ate once a day, saved every coin. They went to London, to America, to China. Everywhere they went, they worked harder than anyone else because they learned that nothing was given, everything was earned. And what you built in your mind, nobody could confiscate. I watched my own brother leave for Lagos with 1 bag and a borrowed shirt. 10 years later, he owned 3 shops. 20 years later, his children were doctors and engineers. He sent money back to build a school in our village, not because the government asked him to, but because that's what we do. We rise and we lift. 50 years after the war, I went to a memorial in Ngugu. I was 62 years old then, my hair gray, my children scattered across 3 continents. Adana was there, old and bent but still fierce. Obi came, his hands scarred from decades of forge work. Chinonso had died the year before, but his great-grandchildren came, carrying a tree sapling from London to plant beside the old Ukwa. At the memorial, I watched a young woman step forward. She was Adana's great-niece, born in Canada, speaking Igbo with an accent, but speaking it nonetheless. She said, "This is not a monument to a defeated people. This is a monument to an undefeatable people. Because defeat is not about losing a war. Defeat is about losing yourself, and that we never did." I wept then, not from sadness, but from understanding. We lost the war for Biafra. We lost our homes, our money, our nation. We lost so much that it should have destroyed us. But here's what I learned watching my people these 50 years. Losing everything teaches you something invaluable. It teaches you that you are more than what you own, more than where you live, more than any border or government or piece of paper. It teaches you that what you carry inside, in your mind and spirit and determination, that's what defines you, and that nobody can take. Today, the Igbo are everywhere. We're 6% of Nigeria, but we dominate business, education, innovation. Our children lead in medicine and technology across the world. We're in Silicon Valley and Geneva and Guangzhou and London. We're traders and doctors and filmmakers and professors. We started with nothing after the war and built everything. People ask me, how did we do it? How did a defeated, dispossessed people rise so fast, spread so far, succeed so thoroughly? I tell them, we did it because we practiced. We practiced losing everything and surviving. We practiced starting over with empty hands. We practiced being told we didn't belong and creating belonging anyway. These are not skills you learn in business school. These are skills you learn from suffering and refusing to stay broken. We did it because of 3 words we teach every Igbo child. Ka chi for. As day breaks, we rise again. It's not just a saying, it's who we are. I'm 72 years old now. My grandchildren speak more English than Igbo, live in places I'll never see, have opportunities I couldn't imagine. But I make sure they know the story. I make sure they understand that they carry something precious, something earned through blood and tears and unbreakable will. I tell them, you are Igbo. That means when you fall, you rise. When you lose, you rebuild. When the world says no, you find another way. Not because you are special, but because your ancestors survived what should have killed them, and they taught their children to survive, and those children taught you. I tell them what Chinonso told me under the Ukwa tree when I was 12 years old, and I thought we were finished. We are defined not by what breaks us, but by what we build after breaking. That's the legacy. That's what I witnessed. A people who lost a war but won something bigger. The knowledge that they could survive anything, build from nothing, and refuse to be erased no matter how hard the world tried. The war ended 50 years ago, but we're still rising, still building, still refusing to accept limits. And we'll keep rising generation after generation because that's what it means to be Igbo.
Not that we don't fall, but that we always get back up. Not that we don't hurt, but that we don't let pain be the end of our story. Remember this when life breaks you. Remember that a whole people lost everything and chose to build anyway. Remember that resilience isn't about not falling down. It's about getting up every single time, no matter how hard the ground feels. That's not just our story. That's the story of the human spirit itself. The story that says you are more than your worst moment, stronger than your deepest wound, capable of more than you know. We are defined not by what breaks us, but by what we build after breaking.
But we are the sun they couldn't stop. We fell, but we did not drop. From pain we learned to stand. From loss we build again.